Welcome to CS288. I'm your instructor, Robert McMillen, and this is the Network Administration class. Today we're going to talk about Module 1, which is our introduction, found in chapters 1 and 2, and then we're going to follow that up with going over the lab, so you know how to do that, and you'll be successful in turning that first module in. Let's talk a little bit about the client-server model in our class. The client-server model is made up of several different things when it comes to Microsoft and Active Directory. You've got both workgroup and domains, domain controllers, forests and domains, and replication. So workgroup and domains are going to cover things like workgroups, which is the default out-of-the-box way of installing Server 2008, where it is a peer-to-peer type of server. So if you've got a Windows server and you've got Windows 7 or 8 computers, they're all basically at the same level. Once you turn that server into a domain controller, then we'll be talking about client-server models. And your server will serve files, applications, and other resources to your clients, which will be your Windows 7 computers. Forests and domains are also something that we'll be talking about. A domain is when you create a domain controller, but you can also create multiple forests as well. So when you create one domain, you also create its parent forest at the same time. When you create multiple domains, you can create multiple domains underneath one forest. If your company is merging with another company that uses Active Directory, then you'll have two forests with domains underneath them. When that happens, you can trust those forests together so you can share data between the domains and subdomains underneath the forests. The other thing we'll talk about is replication. Replication is when you have multiple domain controllers, and when you have a domain controller, it carries a copy of all the usernames, the passwords, and the structure of Active Directory when you make it a global catalog server, and that'll be one of the options that we have when we install Windows. The replication happens when you have multiple domain controllers so that they all carry a copy of these different usernames, passwords, etc. So that way if one server goes down, then the other server will continue to serve all the clients as they try to log in. There are multiple editions of Windows Server 2008. There is the standard version, which is what most people install by default. It includes all of the basic ways of installing Windows and all the different features. Enterprise has some additional features such as clustering and things like that, which we can talk about in future modules. Then there's also the data center version. This is one for when you want to have thousands and thousands of computers connect. The minimum requirements for a data center is 8 physical processors. That doesn't mean cores. Cores are not the same as physical processors. There's very few computers or servers out there that have the 8 physical processors built into them, so they're very high-end ones that people would use in a network operating center. The first version of Windows we now refer to as R1, although at the time when it came out, it was just called Windows Server 2008. It came in both a 32-bit and a 64-bit option because when that came out, there were a lot of servers, a lot of hardware that only supported the 32-bit. When R2 came out a couple of years later, we switched over to 64-bit only because most hardware companies also switched to 64-bit. We will be installing the R2 version for our labs today. There's other versions that are not discussed in this class, but you may have come across them in various businesses. There's the small business server, and that includes Microsoft Exchange, and the premium edition also includes SQL Server. And then there's the foundation server, which is exactly like small business server except without Exchange and SQL. These are designed for very small companies that need an easier way of administering these various different products. So they have much simpler user interfaces and things like that. There's also a web server edition, and the web server edition is simply just a server being used as a web server, and that's it. So you can't install a lot of the features that you can in the standard enterprise or data center. Some of the management tools that come with Server 2008. Server Manager, you'll be definitely taking advantage of Server Manager in this class, where you will install roles and features. It is a graphical management tool for adding roles and features along with storage management, so you can manage your storage devices and things like that along with your roles and features. WinRM is a remote management tool using the command line. So instead of using the graphical version Server Manager, you can use WinRM instead if you wanted to use the command line in that particular case where you want to deploy a lot of different servers at once. It's much easier to do with command line. NAP, which is Network Access Protection, allows you to only allow clean PCs to join your network. So if you decide to enable NAP, then it gives you the opportunity to reject anyone trying to even plug into your network to give them an IP address from your DHCP server. It will reject it if they don't have their antivirus up to date, their Windows updates up to date, and several other criteria that you can set up on your own to determine what you believe a clean PC is. Roles and features. This is a new thing to Windows 2008. It allows you to add roles that affect everyone in the organization, such as DNS, DHCP, and file services. There are other roles as well that we will explore. It allows you to add features such that only affect the server itself, such as Telnet Client, BitLocker, encrypting file services, those kinds of things. So there's a big difference between a role that you see here and a feature that you see here. The difference is that roles affect everyone and features affect only the server itself. So that's so when you see the roles and the features and you're wondering why they split them up that way, that is the main difference between the two of them. There are also sub-roles known as role services. So this is a little different than server roles. So role services are the subcategory to server roles. For instance, if you install IIS, which is the web component that allows you to host websites, a role service might be FTP, being able to do file transfer protocol. And there's many other role services inside the server role called IIS. So it's important you don't confuse these, even though the terminology does seem very confusing. Two types of installations. There's the graphical user interface, which is the one we'll be doing. It is the traditional installation that you may have been used to in 2003 and previous versions. It is heavy on resources and less secure. So there are some basic parts of the GUI that make the server use a lot of RAM, a lot of hard drive space, and things like that. And also it makes the server less secure because these tools are installed and people may find vulnerabilities that they can exploit. The server core is the other version. It is a command line only. It uses less resources. It is more secure because less things are installed on it, but it's also more difficult to learn because you have to learn various different commands in order to make that work. So, new tools that come in Server 2008. There is WDS, which is the Windows Deployment Services, that allows you to push out an installation from a workstation using the PXE, or sometimes we refer to that as PXE. So when you boot up a client computer, PXE will ask, hey, do we have a WDS server in the network? If so, go ahead and click now, and then it'll find the image and install it directly from the workstation, which is a very handy tool. Then there's Wake, Windows Automated Installation Kit. That is a kit made up of other subtools, and that allows you to automate installation of Windows to multiple servers at once. There is the WSIM, which is the Windows System Image Monitor. It's a utility to create an answer file. Now, an answer file is something that you can use to deploy a lot of different servers without having to click such as the name of the server that you want to use, the IP address, whether it's a member of the domain or not. You can automate that using an answer file. It makes it a lot simpler to deploy a lot at once. ImageX is a command line tool that does a lot of what these graphical tools do, and it allows you to modify images for rapid deployment in case you wanted to deploy a lot of Windows operating systems to a lot of devices all at once. And this isn't just for 2008. You can also do this for client versions such as Windows 7. Windows PE, you may have seen Windows PE before if you've installed an IBM or an HP or a Dell server. It is a light version of Windows that boots up that allows you to configure the Windows installation environment. It's also can be used to troubleshoot Windows installation in case there's a problem. SysPrep prepares images to be deployed and copied. And SysPrep is also used to copy an image in case you you already have an installation done. You can use SysPrep in the case of VMware and other tools. So if you install the first version of Windows and you want to just copy that so you don't have to install it all over again, then you would use SysPrep to generalize that particular installation so it wouldn't have the same identification, because you cannot have the same SID, security identifier. You can't have that in more than one location in a network, or you will have problems. Installation mediums. So you can install the traditional way from a DVD. You can install over the network if you have the installation files in another location. You would like to install it that way. You can also install from an ISO file, which we'll be doing today using VMware. And you can use virtual installation through HyperV. So we won't be able to use HyperV because if you're using VMware, you cannot use HyperV inside it. You can only use one virtualization tool at a time. But I can show you where you can find the HyperV installation if you choose to use that in the future instead of VMware. So HyperV is just Microsoft's virtualization tool. There's a few other products out there as well. There's VirtualBox, there's Zen, things like that. All very good tools. HyperV just happens to be the one that you can use inside of Windows itself. When you go to activate a product, there's a couple of different ways to do that. One is the KMS and the other is the MAK. The KMS is typically used when you have a lot, like hundreds and hundreds of servers. You create a KMS server. And what that does is it keeps the activations going when you do not need to necessarily communicate back with Microsoft. So basically this KMS server is internal to your network, and it keeps all the other servers from communicating with Microsoft to make sure the activation is up to date. So that's basically what the KMS is for. The MAK is the more traditional way, which we will generally experience in this class, where you don't need to communicate with the KMS server. You can just go ahead and communicate directly to Microsoft. HyperV Licensing. It allows licenses to be deployed to virtual servers. It runs on HyperV. Although we won't be doing this in class, you will need to know that for some of the quizzes. Guests are virtual servers and desktops running on the host. So your computer that you'll be using is called the host computer. We won't be making any changes to the host computer with the exception of installing VMware on that computer. Guests are all the virtual servers and desktops, such as Windows 2008, Windows 7, that we will be installing in VMware sitting on top of your host. We'll be making changes to the guests or virtual machines, but we won't be making changes to your own host computer. So you don't have to worry about messing up your own personal computer for this class. So in summary, we talked about the client-server model, the different editions of Server 2008, management tools, roles and features, new tools in Server 2008, types of installations and mediums, and types of activations. So now let's go ahead and cover your Lab 1 and reading assignment. So you're going to be reading chapters 1 and 2, Introduction and Installing Windows Server 2008. You're going to use your own computer. You could also use a computer in one of the labs if you need to at the school. And you'll need to have Windows XP or newer. We will not be making changes to the host operating system, as I mentioned, other than installing the free VMware player. You can download the free VMware player at this link. So if you wanted to open up this link, it will take you right to this page. And from here, we want to click download the VMware player and VMware Player Plus for Windows. So we'll go ahead and click that, and we're now downloading. You also will need to, there we go, we'll go ahead and open that. We'll also need to install from Elms, or now it's called DreamSpark. You need to download the ISO files for Windows 7 Professional and Windows Server 2008 Standard or Enterprise. Doesn't matter which one you use, but Standard is a little bit smaller. So once this particular file is downloaded, then we'll be able to install the VMware player, which we'll do right here. So I'm going to pause it anytime there's a long installation time or break, so that way you don't have to wait during that period, and it'll keep the video a little bit shorter for you. Okay, our VMware player is now downloaded. We're going to go ahead and run the installation. And we're choosing all the defaults here. And if you want, you can check for product updates. I'm not going to in this particular time. And I'm going to uncheck the help, although you can leave it on if you want. We'll create some icons, desktop icons, which is fine. And we'll continue the installation. Okay, that took a couple of minutes on my computer. It may take anywhere from a few minutes to a half an hour based on your resources. Make sure that your computer has at least 4 gigabytes of RAM. You can check that out by going to the Task Manager on your host computer. Click on More Details, or it depends on the version of Windows that you have. And then we'll click on Performance, and then we'll see under Memory how much memory you have. So I have 8 gigabytes. You can see it says here 7.9. So I have 8 gigs of RAM on my computer, which is more than enough. You just need to have at least 4. And the reason for that is because we're going to need RAM that's still being used on the host, as well as RAM that will be used for the different virtual machines we install. One other note is when you go to install this product, if for some reason you cannot install the Windows Server, then the problem might be that in your BIOS you might have the virtualization turned off. Now I can't show that in this particular case because Windows has to be running in order for this video to work properly. But when you boot into your computer, you get an option to press F1, F2, sometimes F10, sometimes delete, depends on the version of your computer, to go into the BIOS settings. And sometimes this is under advanced, under general, it could be anywhere, but look for where it says virtualization, or it might also be under the term VTX. And there may be some other terms as well that are out there. Make sure that that's enabled. If it's not enabled, then the VMware installation will work, but when you go to install your Windows operating systems, you will get an error. So let's go ahead and finish up. We'll go and close that box, double click on VMware Player, and we're going to create a new virtual machine. So we want to choose, since we've downloaded our ISO files from DreamSpark, we're going to go ahead and choose these ISO files. If you use Google Chrome to download your files, sometimes it renames the files to be something else. So you want to make sure that you right-click and then choose Rename on your files and make sure that it ends in ISO. If you don't see ISO in there, then you can go ahead and go to View. Sometimes it's under Folder Options, and you can make sure that you check the box that says File Name Extensions. Then you go back to here and you choose Rename, and then you'll see .iso or .whatever it is, depending on if you use Chrome, it might be some other file name. So all you have to do is change that to .iso, and then your file will work fine. So now we're going to choose Installer Disk Image, and we'll click on Browse, and then we'll click on our location of our file, and we're going to choose the Windows 2008. And we'll click Next. Under Key, we'll go ahead and leave that blank. we'll go ahead and put in the password. The password is always going to be the word password, but with a capital P and a 0 for the O. That way we can be compliant with the 8 characters and at least one uppercase and one number. And then we'll check the logon automatically. Click Next. Yes, we want to continue. What is the virtual machine name? Well, in our lab, it says here that our name is going to be SRV-OXX. So we'll go ahead and change that. Next. Okay, maximum disk size. This is up to you. We won't need any more than, say, 5 gigabytes, but you can make it any size you want. I'm going to go ahead and change it to 20. And then you can leave the default option here, and then you can go ahead and choose Finish and make sure it's going to power up when it's done. And now we should see the installation begin. One of the other things you want to make sure you check is under Edit Virtual Machine Settings. And by default, it wants to use 2048. Well, if you only have 4 gigs of RAM, then you want to change that to 1024. You don't need any more than that. You could even do it on 512 if you needed to, but of course it would run really slowly. You can also go in and change your processors, or it says number of processor cores. I've got a lot of processor cores on this, so I could do a lot more. So if you want to, you could change it to 2 or 4, and it'll make that run much more quickly as well. Okay, let's go back to our assignment. We've already installed VMware Player. If for some reason you have any problems with VMware Player, or if you're using Windows 8.1, you will have to install VMware Workstation. You can get the Workstation version from DreamSpark as well. All right, now the lab projects you'll need to do. And by the way, Workstation is also installed by default on all the lab computers at the college. In the lab projects, you're going to need to install some various different roles and features and do screenshots from those roles and features, also called captures. Once you're done with all of those particular ones, and you'll need to install another virtual machine as well, then you'll go ahead and take those screenshots and save them, as you see here under Submission, right in the assignments area. You can upload directly from there, the LMS. And you want to do PDF, Doc, or DocX. You can use any tools you want to get it into one of those 3 formats. So that concludes our introduction to Windows Network Administration, and we look forward to seeing your work and moving on to Module 2.